Bonjour, bonsoir. How are you, dear friends? We are building the most inspiring and phenomenal communities of wine lovers. As we all know, wine is the catalyst of the greatest discussion. We'll be talking wine, but of course food, and everything that touches all our emotion and senses. Bonjour, bonsoir, dear friends. Welcome, bienvenue on JCB Live. This is our wonderful happy hour time, and today we're going to be with a great friend, an incredible, charismatic, and so talented and charming man. Unusual for a writer to be as charming as he is, and you will discover for yourself very soon. He's been heading the wine side of All Food and Wine magazine, a major job, one of the most incredible magazines in the history of the US. He was before that running Amex, then Wine and Spirits magazine, and of course Fortune magazine, needless to say, and Travel and Leisure. Quite a man, quite a resume, born and raised in the fabulous state of Texas. And Ray is doing so many shows today, from Today shows to Food and Wine magazine shows. He has an incredible Instagram everybody should follow. I'm very pleased to welcome, all the way from New York City, our very good friend, Ray Isle. Bonjour, Ray.
Bonjour, Jean-Charles. It's nice to see you.
It's great to see you. And Ray, I love that charming look you have. What a beautiful beard. Is it a new COVID-19 evolution?
Like many people, I took the opportunity of not going into the office every day to just experiment with a slightly different look. I'm jury's out. My daughter hates it. My wife likes it. The rest of the world can decide for themselves.
So when that happens, because Ray, you've always been great advice. You have a beautiful wife and a great daughter. I have the same. I have two daughters. If one says one thing and the other, do you go to the wife's opinion or you go to the daughter's opinion?
I go to my wife's opinion. It's much safer to go with my wife's opinion, you know.
Well, I'll cheers to that.
Cheers, absolutely.
And welcome on JCB Live. I'm so thrilled we are together. So over the last few days, you were up in the Northeast and you just came back to New York City to check in with the magazine.
I did. We were I was up in Maine, but the place we have in Maine is terrible Wi-Fi, terrible cell connection, and we're closing an issue of the magazine, and I needed better Wi-Fi. So I came back to New York for a time. I'm going to head back up to Maine, get away from the city.
Well, it's a beautiful place, and needless to say, the summer coming. Isn't it one of the most pristine places in the entire U.S. at this time, and pure?
It's spectacular. The air is clear. The water is gorgeous. It's quiet. There aren't 10 million other people breathing down your neck the way there are in New York. So I definitely intend to turn around and head back. I do have to get.
We're delighted to catch you at the perfect time. Now, Ray, you said you're closing the new issue of Food and Wine magazine. So maybe you want to give us a little preview. Maybe we'll be lucky enough to have an insight.
So we work with print, at least. We're a few months ahead. So we're closing the September issue, which interestingly is a travel issue. September is always a travel issue. We've had to rethink that a little bit. But we have some interesting stories coming up in that. Among them, and we did a kind of rethink of this, our best restaurants around the world package. Of course, restaurants right now are very complicated, but a lot of places are opening up. Europe is largely open, though we can't go there right now. And it's the same, we run into the same thing. Our July issue is on stands right now. It's our annual restaurant issue, which are best new chefs, best new restaurants. We were closing that right when COVID hit. And so it was a very, very, to use the word of the moment, it was a very fast pivot to a different, it was a lot of work actually to rethink the entire issue and try and anticipate 3 months ago what the restaurant world would look like right now. And I think we did a surprisingly good job. The best new restaurants that we picked out are almost all alas, one of them has closed before we got the issue out, but the rest of them are still in business.
Good.
The best new chefs, the fact that there's a pandemic going on doesn't change the fact that they're insanely talented and they're going to be great and they're going to, change the way we think about food down the line. So I'm very, I think of all the issues I've actually worked on at Food and Wine, this may be one of the ones I'm most proud of, because it was such a, all hands on deck, everybody panic, let's figure out what we're doing with this. And it came
Sometimes we do our best work in panic mode, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, harvest every year is basically panic mode for winemakers.
Well, you know that well as a cellarite you've been when you actually started.
Yeah,
right?
I worked, hauling hoses and cleaning out barrels and driving a forklift. And I managed to back a forklift over my foot at one point while standing next to the forklift trying to steer it. That was not really very bright.
A true Renaissance man.
And really
You know how to
painful.
do it all. And how does a cellarite and a man originally from Texas goes to the wine world and then become a wine writer? What a great journey. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's been a kind of a crazy journey, because when even through college and graduate school, I had no earthly clue I might be involved in wine in any context whatsoever. I was headed down the road to probably becoming an English professor. And what happened was that I got, often it's because of, love affair. I got interested in wine because my girlfriend at the time was working at expensive restaurants, high-end restaurants. And so she was acquainted with wine. I used to go wait for her to get off work and sit at the bar, and they would pour me different things. And I thought, well, this stuff's actually really quite tasty. I didn't grow up with it at all. And what happened was I moved to California for a writing fellowship. And in grad school, but it put me in the Bay Area, and I started doing what everybody does. They go to Napa Valley and visit wineries, and then I started visiting more wineries. Then I started thinking, well, this is actually really interesting. Maybe I could write an article about it someday. And essentially I found out, I can't remember who told me, I think it was actually a sales guy at K&L Wines told me that you could, like, for some of the small wineries I was interested in, you could help out with bottling, because they were using a bottling truck and they'd pay you in wine. You just sort of have a day.
Barter is the best trade.
So I did that. Yeah. So I did that. And then I thought, well, what if I actually worked harvest? And so I became a, unpaid intern harvest rat, basically, cellar rat, harvest rat, what do you want to say? And I did that for 2 years while I was still teaching creative writing. And at the end of that, I just realized I had no interest in going into academia, and I definitely wanted to go into wine. I didn't know that I was going to write about it necessarily. I thought, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I ended up, through a really weird series of personal connections and so on, I ended up being the supplier rep for Dows and Graham's ports in New York City. So I was hauling a bag of port around New York City. And I can tell you, in August, hauling a bag of port around New York City is not a way to make sales. You walk into
You must have had cheese too with it.
Why are you here?
It's typically how it's eaten in the US, right, with the cheese.
Yeah, it is, but it's not eaten at all during the summer.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
So what the thing that really changed everything was I wrote a piece about Stanford graduates in the wine business for the Stanford Alumni magazine, and Josh Green at Wine and Spirits, one of his staff people was a Stanford grad, and he saw that they actually. That guy sent that article to Josh and said, this guy lives in New York and he seems to work in the wine business and he can write. You should get in touch with him. Josh got in touch with me, and that conversation very quickly turned into a job offer with Josh Green at Wine and Spirits.
Well, and he's a fabulous man, Wine and Spirit magazine, and obviously has a lot of wonderful insights. So that was your beginning into writing officially for a magazine?
That was when the writing and the wine came together, basically, because I've been writing fiction and whatnot, and I've been doing some freelance journalism, and I've been doing wine, but I hadn't gotten them to really come together. And that, I spent 5 years at Wine and Spirits, and that was kind of my graduate education in wine, because we were tasting 40 wines in the morning and 40 wines in the afternoon. like 40 McLaren Vale Shiraz in the morning, 40 McLaren Vale Shiraz in the afternoon,
Good breakfast.
40 Chiantis in the morning, 40 Chiantis in the afternoon. And you do that and you learn really quickly. You saturate yourself.
Yeah, that's the way to do it, though. The more you taste, hopefully the more you know. Often I think the more I taste, the less I know, but that's another story. And then where did you go from there? Because that's a great start, obviously. After the Stanford alumni, which you still do, and are you still part of it?
I kind of stopped writing for the alumni magazine a year or two after I got to New York. And not for any real reason, but I kind of stopped doing freelance work while I was at Wine and Spirits. I didn't really have time to, and I didn't really need to. And the other thing is that, and I started traveling too, which is one of the best things about writing about wine is you get to go to places that have vines, And since the East Coast office of Wine and Spirits covered Europe, I started traveling. I went to Champagne, I went to Spain, I went to, and if I didn't know that I wanted to write about wine before that, that definitely cemented it. It's like, this is amazing. I could, they'll actually pay me to write about wine and I get to go places. It's ludicrous, and pretty wonderful. So.
What an experience. Well, talking about bubbles, Ray,
yes.
To celebrate us seeing each other virtually, which we haven't done except, a few times, I'd love for you to describe in a few words this amazing wine that is a Pinot Noir from Burgundy. This is called the JCB 13. And as you know, in Burgundy, with Crémant de Bourgogne, we're very innovative of great villages, Premier Cru, and sometimes we venture into Grand Cru, and we vinify them as such. So this is 13 in honor of my lovely wife. You know her well, Gina.
I do.
And this is all about foreverness, divinity, when she's good to me, and of course, my passion.
Right.
So give us a few words on that, because this is 100% Pinot, something you adore.
Well, I adore Pinot, and what I love about, it tastes like, it smells like Pinot, it tastes like Pinot. You've got that. Even though it's a sparkling wine and it's sort of pale salmon color, it smells of berries. It smells of of strawberry and a little bit of raspberry, and it's also just so invigorating. You take a sip, and one, you want to take another sip, but two, it just kind of, it's what I find with really good sparkling wine. It always reminds me of the Willy Wonka scene with the fizzy lifting juice.
Oh, I love it.
It just, you start to elevate in your chair, so it's lifting. Yeah. So lifting, I guess, is the word for it.
Thank you.
It gives you more life.
Well, I love it. She does too. So it's a perfect pairing.
Yeah.
So Ray, what advice would you give to people who love wine, who fall in love with it like you have today, and they want to go into writing? Any suggestion you have for them?
Yeah, sure. First thing, make sure you know how to write about anything, about everything. Like study writing as a skill. The fact, I think people sometimes make the leap that because they can articulately talk, they can also therefore put down on the page exactly as articulately as they speak. And writing is its own skill. It's, how to craft a story, how to put a sentence together in a way that, that pulls the reader along rather than makes them go to sleep. So don't just take it for granted in terms of your own ability with prose, like study prose and as much as you study wine.
Yes.
That's, and flip side is learn everything you can about wine. And that doesn't mean necessarily like the depths of the chalk soil in every single location down to the millimeter. It's more about learn the people, learn the places, learn the stories. Because as a writer, unless you're writing technically for the trade, let's assume you're writing for consumers, you're really telling stories. You
That's
want
right.
to be captivated by it. And readers, like food and wine readers at least, may want a little bit of technical information. They certainly want to know if this is Pinot Noir, but they also want to know where it came from and what that place was like and who made it and and why they decided to do this wine. And so you have to kind of assume that you're always learning with wine. You know, I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. There's no question that there's endless amounts that I need to still learn. And then the other thing is publish anywhere you can, because it's hard to start out writing for a large print magazine, for instance. You know, publish your own blog, find local, regional, publications, digital or not, that will publish you. I mean, I started out writing for the Stanford Alumni Magazine because I was in grad school at Stanford. I've written for the Rice Alumni Magazine. You know, write for anybody that you can sell it to, and don't worry about whether it's I think what's underpitched in wine are wine stories to publications that don't focus on wine.
Yes.
I mean, Amtrak magazine, who knows what, who knows when we'll be flying in airplanes regularly again, but airplane magazines, you just have to think of that magazine, think of its audience, and then think of a story that ties into wine that would make sense for them.
That's a great advice. Now, on that note, Ray, you have an amazing Instagram and Facebook and social media. Tell us about this. So besides food and wine, people can follow you. Great details, because you're very avid editor and publisher in those.
Yeah, so I do a lot of social media. I've done a lot of TV, which, again, I didn't plan to do, but sort of happened. And similarly to writing, when I started doing TV stuff through Food and Wine, I did local New York One station, that kind of thing.
Yes.
No one national, when it comes to TV, will put you on a segment without some sense that you're not going to be a complete lunatic or flail around hopelessly. So you end up doing smaller audience things before you do large audience things. But it's it's just another form of communication about wine. It happens to be visual. And I love doing, I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook like everybody. But I particularly love Instagram because of it's so visual, and it's so much fun capturing the image. Twitter right now, there's so much that's political and angry.
Really?
Yeah, you may have noticed. It's the strangest thing. So Instagram is kind of
so Ray, the name is Ray Isle, as simple as that.
Instagram, it's Ray Isle. And I'll tell you, on Twitter, I'm Isle Wine, and the reason I am Isle Wine is there is already a Ray Isle, and it is a retired guy in Australia who lives on Raymond Island off the coast of Melbourne. And he registered this a bazillion years ago. He posts like once a year about soccer. And I keep meaning to write him and say, look, sell it to me, give it to me, whatever. But it's so random and funny that I
know the feeling. We've had a few of those as well.
Yeah.
So Ray, you mentioned something very unique earlier on. You talked about new food trends. And I know we'll talk wine more, but the way we perceive food, the way we see food, the way we cook food, the way we enjoy food in restaurant. What is your view of this evolution? Because I'd love to hear your version of it.
Right now, I mean, the COVID sort of.
Yes, I think the post-COVID.
It's so hard to know. I've been on a couple of panels about the future of restaurants and so on. And I think the upside is that people who get into owning restaurants in the first place, or chefs, are by nature entrepreneurial people. It's not a safe job choice in any way whatsoever. And so I have faith in their ability to ride this out in terms of creative, whether you're serving, right now in New York, for instance, everybody has outdoor seating because the government allowed for it. And the speed at which things have been built and sort of fenced off and made to look quite nice. I mean, New York is looking kind of weirdly Parisian right now. It's the sort of
I love it. Maybe it's a revolution.
Yeah, and I don't want it to go away. I think it's great. Who cares? We lose a few parking spaces, big deal. But I think that the real question is how long this COVID thing is going to go on for, because it does mess with one of the great things of restaurants, which is service, which is the interaction between the staff and the customer, from going to restaurants, one of the great things about a great restaurant is how sort of welcomed you feel there, and how, and how the interaction with the person, who's the wait person who's coming to you, and the sense that there's a chef in there who has a personality, who's making this food for you, and this the bustle and the warmth of everybody in the place. And it's hard to envision a restaurant world without that. And so I'm really hoping there's a vaccine for this thing quickly. But it's, I'm more optimistic than I was a month ago, let's say. And literally just walking down the street in New York in the evening and seeing all these people out dining outside, separated by 6 feet, does give you hope, I think, in a good way.
Absolutely. Well, you posted a great story, and I believe it was with Food and Wine, but you've echoed it on social media about making bread at home and going back to the basics. Would you share with us a little bit about this?
Yeah, so I did. I like many people, I started making sourdough bread at home, and I don't. I mean, it's become almost a cliche, but what was nice was that one of our editors at Food and Wine, who is a baker, and she bakes a lot and really knows what she's doing. She kind of did a Johnny Appleseed trip through Brooklyn, dropping off sourdough starter at other staff members' houses for them. Margaret Ebby, and so she dropped off. I met her on the street. She gave me a little plastic thing of sourdough starter, and I started making sourdough bread. And then I did this completely.
Are you sure it was sourdough? Because you never know, little things in plastic bags in New York City. You never know.
It could have been anything. Yeah, and it's alive. So who knows? It seems. I mean, it seems to have created bread, so I'm guessing it was sourdough and not something illegal. I have no idea, but it. I ended up doing this completely insane video about pairing wine and sourdough bread, because people do get a little over specific about pairing sometimes.
Yes.
And so I had some fun with it, which is still on my Instagram site.
Well, on that note, what do you think is the sociological evolution of the American society, the American kitchen, people cooking at home, people staying home more, people in a European way, so to speak, inviting more people in their home? Do you think that's going to be a new trend in the US at some stage?
I think it might be. I'd like to see, I don't want to see fine dining go away, but I do think, I mean, of course not. It's interesting. I think people are rediscovering cooking partly through this forced isolation.
Yes.
Statistically, just looking at our website traffic, and a lot of our content is recipes, our website traffic has been through the roof for this period.
I've used it a lot, just to let you know.
Yeah, good. Please keep doing so.
We love it. It's so well done.
A lot of people searching recipes and cooking, and I cook. I've been cooking for a long time. I love to cook. I find it. The act of chopping is very soothing, especially if you've got unexpressed anger.
So when we cook together, you'll do the chopping then.
I do the chopping. Yeah,
that's the toughest for me.
Yeah, it's it's very Zen-like. So, but I hope that people will keep cooking at home. I mean, I certainly want them to go out to restaurants and support that community. But
of course,
it's such a pleasure to cook a good meal at home, and to I've been, because it's what I do. I've been photographing what I cook with the wines I've been drinking. But it's a pleasure to cook for other people too. It's very rewarding. So I do think that there's been a boom certainly in baking bread, but also I just think in cooking across the board.
Yeah, I'm with you. At Buena Vista, as an example, which is the next wine we should try, this lovely Chardonnay that I really want you to give us your opinion. We've reestablished throughout this period outdoor seating, of course, which is mandatory.
Yeah.
Great pairings with cheese, with charcuterie, with all different kinds of dry fruits and almonds and walnuts and pistachios, and even drip honey with your cheese. And people are really interested in it. I'm amazed about how many questions we get, and how people then ask us, okay, where do I buy that cheese, or where do I find those beautiful breadsticks? And I think people are becoming more engaged in that. Wouldn't you say so?
I think so. I mean, I think people are. The truth is that being at home all the time is somewhat boring. So one way you can actually make life at home more interesting is by expanding your food horizons and, trying different cheeses. I mean, one thing you can order online, you can get cheese. You can get cheese sent to you at home. If you haven't had, a really extraordinary blue cheese from wherever, Vermont, Bailey Hazen Blue from, is a great blue cheese. You can try
Yes, I agree. I love it too.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
it's a great way to travel, thanks to food and food recipes. As you do so well in the magazine and on your social media, you could travel through recipes.
Yeah, absolutely. You can sit at home and open a bottle of of sparkling wine from Cremant de Bourgogne. You can have some Délices de Bourgogne cheese. You can have some époisses. You can have you can cook. I don't know, cook whatever you like. Cook some kidneys, but
I love it. You're very French today.
You're then you're in Bon Romane in a sense.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, talking about a great Chardonnay land, I wanted you to try this new wine, Viticultural Society from Buena Vista. As you know, you've been there. We bought this amazing winery that is the first, California's first. It founded in 1857. And this is a new vintage expression, the Chardonnay from Sonoma County. I'd love your comments in a few words, and then for you to tell us a little bit about the virtual evolution of the Food and Wine Classic, because you were the creator of one of the most amazing events where you meet people, you interact, you get to taste wines and the tents and meet the vintner, and we get to meet the people who really purchase wine, not only here in Carmel, of course, but the Aspen one as well.
That's right.
So after you describe this wine a little bit, why don't you tell us about that evolution and how you're going virtual?
So this wine, which I quite like, by the way, which because I turned off my AC, is warming up quite quickly in my apartment, but it's lovely. It's
you're still looking great.
Not dripping sweat yet. It's about 90 outside in New York right now. But what I like about this wine is there's that lovely lemon cream kind of character that feels to me like it's Sonoma. I don't know where in Sonoma this is, if it's Carneros or it's
yes,
because it tastes like Carneros to me.
For sure, it is. Well done.
I didn't look at the label. I just opened it and poured it, and I don't have my glasses on, couldn't read it anyway. But it's got that beautiful kind of lifted lemon cream character, but it's got underlying it is a little bit of spice note, and I like the way the spice note ties to the finish, which is quite dry. And I'm not saying it's a dry wine, of course, but there's a little tiny note of it tastes almost as though there was a tiny bit of skin contact or something, because it's just that little infinitesimal hint of astringency that freshens it up.
Wow.
And so it really is beautifully refreshing. Actually, it's it would be an ideal wine to sit outside with a picnic and a cold roast chicken and and some cheese.
Well, I might as well do that this weekend. That's a great suggestion.
What the hell? You're in a beautiful place. You might as well. You can come out of the dark cave that you're in there and go into the sun.
Well, congratulations for the description. You're exactly right. Extended skin contacts, and I know you love that Pinot. I wanted to thank you as well for putting it into the top 20 wines. Yeah,
it's a terrific. What's the stuff that's going on with Buena Vista is fascinating, because it really is, it was the first bonded winery in California, wasn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
And the first one to really, bring viticultural Vitis vinifera from Europe, over 100,000 different cuttings. And obviously making sparkling wine, Méthode Champenoise, in those beautiful caves in 1863. So I think for you too, as we talk about Aspen and what you do virtually, I have a feeling, Ray, and we've had this discussion together, are Americans ready to be very proud of this amazing history that they've had and really put it forward like we are with Buena Vista?
I hope so. It's interesting that you look at the history of wine in the U.S. compared to Europe. It's so short. It's yes. Like, our history, the history of wine in the U.S. is blink compared to how long it's been in Europe. But it's gotten now to the point where it's long enough that it really is a history, and it deserves, California's been making very, very good wine since the 1800s,
That's right.
and and I can't remember. Buena Vista may be one of the ones that was recognized in the World's Fair.
That's it.
I know that Engelmann
Yeah,
was.
amazing memory. That's it.
Yeah.
Number one in the World's Fair.
Yeah, and that's a long time ago at this point, and so that deserves taking some pride in that, I think. And
we think, you came here, Stanford, obviously you're writing with food and wine. I personally think as a Frenchman that it's so important we talk, and as we present wine to the world in general, we present it through its history, and through the past, and through the different centuries. And I think it's important as well we start to do that in the US so people feel prouder about their heritage and more confident.
Yeah, I think it is important. The US has always been very, we're very fond of the new. It's in a different way. Europe has more, just traveling through Europe, you sense that the past is more present in the now, that you can't get away from the past. And the US wants everything often to be just, we want the new thing, whatever it is, but there's a lot of power in having that history, and it's important to recognize it.
Well, talking about that, you adapting so well as a magazine into the digital space and into the virtual world. So tell us how you're going to translate all those great events you do with yourself and with Amex and all that within a virtual platform.
So for instance, the big one we have coming up is we're doing a virtual version of the Food and Wine Classic in Aspen. And we had to cancel this year. Oddly enough, a 5,000 person festival was really not going to happen in June.
That's so too bad. We love it so much.
And it's a great event. And I've been 15 years running. I love it. It was, it's heartbreaking to have to cancel it. It's a wonderful gathering, and it's a party, and it's all about food and about wine, and it's a big part of my year. And so it's just weird to cancel it. It's one of the longest running, if not the longest running, major food festival in the US. So this is the first time it's ever been canceled. But we are going to do a virtual, somewhat scaled down, virtual version of Aspen on July 23rd. It is free to register for if you go to, if you either go to the Food and Wine website or go to foodandwine.com/classic. You'll find the registration information, or go to my Instagram. It's on there if you scroll down.
That's great. So how is it going to be organized? Are you still going to do sessions live? We're
going to do sessions live. It's going to be 2.5 hours, I believe. It's not a hugely long thing. We have chefs. We have 2 wine seminars. The wines for the seminars, we teamed up with wine.com, so they'd be available around the country. So you can order them in advance if you want to taste along. But I'm doing a what wine goes best with pizza
love it
seminar, which is a blast, And if you can't find the Chianti, that's one of the wines I'm using, you can use another Chianti. If you would rather use a ham and pineapple pizza for some insane reason than a pepperoni pizza, go for it. And so the idea is people will taste along, and I'll talk and at least be moderately entertaining, I hope. But that's just one section there. We have a number of chefs who are going to participate. We have Garrett Oliver from Brooklyn Brewery, who's going to do a beer presentation.
Great.
And it's ideally, it will work seamlessly as this kind of flow from one event to the next. So it's almost as though you're going to an event, except that you happen to be in front of your computer, or if you can stream to your TV. And again, it's, we decided it seems silly to charge for it. We've set it up where when you register, there's an opportunity to donate to a number of charities that we're tied in with, which is important, I think, especially right now.
Yes.
Like World Central Kitchen, Jose Andres, various others. But that's voluntary. You can also just register for free and listen and taste along and have fun. It's a little bit of a.
So, Ray, you're so charismatic when you do your wine seminars. How do you going to have the guests have the wine at the same time as you speak about them?
Well, ideally, if people register in advance, they can actually order the wine. There's a special package set up with wine.com that will be delivered to them in time for the
Oh,
tasting.
great. So you have that set up.
So that's, yeah. So we have that set up with wine.com. And there's a link on our, on our registration page for it. I mean, I'm doing 3 wines. I'm doing a Pinot Noir from Oregon, a sparkling Italian rosé, and a Chianti. We'll see which one goes best with pizza. I mean, people might think the Chianti because it's Chianti, but hey, sparkling rosé,
Absolutely.
We've just had some. It was very good. I could drink that with a pizza. So,
in fact, the great pizza recipe I was looking at, I did it with the ladies who are twin ladies, and Gina, and we looked at one of the recipe from Food and Wine. So you see, you were close to our mind and our hearts.
Yeah, and actually, this seminar really did come out of the fact I've been cooking a lot of pizza at home right now because I've been making bread, I've been making dough, and pizza's it's actually really fun to make. It's easy.
It's easy. And
great.
You don't need a pizza oven. You can just use your regular oven, which is great.
Turn it up really high.
That's it.
And then don't forget about the pizza.
So Ray, tell us as well about the Today Show that you do. And
yeah. So I do. Well, right now I'm not doing a lot of TV because all the stuff, but I have been doing the Today Show regularly for the past 10 or 11 years now, I think. Initially it was Kathy Lee and Hoda, and now that's shifted. But I did, I love TV as a medium to talk about wine, even though the segments tend to be very fast and very short, and you can't impart a lot of information. The reach is so huge,
yes.
and it reaches an audience. Because it's such a broad audience, and because it's not a wine-specific audience, you get to teach or tell people about wine who wouldn't otherwise pay attention to it. But it's the one thing you always have to remember about TV: it's a visual medium. There's not much you can do with a glass of wine other than kind of swirl it and sip it. So you have to come up with something else.
Well, we've had fun a few times together, thanks to you. We're on the Today Show, and you made it fun.
It's fun, and it's a hoot. It's a huge adrenaline rush when you do it. I was lucky. It certainly wasn't the plan, but I spent a lot of time in college acting in plays. That was a lot of my spare time was spent doing that. I didn't do it because I thought it would ever be useful for anything. I just loved being on stage, and it turns out to have been extremely useful.
Absolutely, and you're so good on it. So on that note, what inspires you, Ray? Because everybody's going to know you if they don't already, which everybody does, but they'll be on your social media. They're going to watch you on Today's Show. They're going to be on Food and Wine. What drives you? What inspires you?
I would, what inspires me, particularly when it comes to wine, weirdly, more than individual wines, it's people in the business. I whether it's winemakers or winery owners or sommeliers, stories come back to people almost always, no matter what you can be writing about a specific Grand Cru in Burgundy, let's say, but somewhere in the line, if it's really a story, it comes back to a person and their inspiration to make that wine, or their family history, and whether it's Henri Jaillet or who knows who. And so
yes.
I find that the wine business inspires me because the wine business is unlike a lot of other businesses in that most of the people in it are really invested in wine and love it, which I think is different from law, let's say, or I don't know what else, car sales or something like that.
Yes, no, absolutely.
And so that plus the agricultural nature of wine and the connection to the land is all incredibly inspiring. And so I sort of wondered at some point if I would get bored with wine, and I have yet to get bored with wine. I hope never to get bored with wine, but you do wonder any time in a career, you kind of wonder, well, is this, am I going to be okay doing this for the rest of my life? And so far I haven't. I'm also inspired, I am inspired by really great writing, and not typically wine. I don't read that much wine writing for pleasure because it's what I do for a job. But I read a tremendous amount of nonfiction and novels.
Really?
And
what do you recommend right now?
Right now, so what did I just finish? let's see. I've been reading mysteries. Actually, there's a mystery writer who just passed away recently, Andrea Camilleri, who wrote a long series of mysteries set in Sicily, which are quite wonderful. And then I also, what else have I been reading lately? The book *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari, if I've got his name right, is a remarkable, remarkably brilliant, condensed look at the history of humans.
Yes.
And, and it's.
I have this book, and it's amazing.
It's amazing.
I agree with you.
Yeah, and it was, and that's the kind of thing that does inspire you. You read it and you think,
for sure.
I don't know how he condensed so clearly and so brilliantly, into a very readable story. What a vast history of an entire species that has to be sentient, and and we're part of. It's really quite something. So that was remarkable.
And you read a lot?
I read a ton.
Right?
Yeah. And I read, I recently read, there's a wonderful novella by Catherine Ann Porter called Pale Horse, Pale Rider, which is set during the Spanish influenza epidemic in 1918. And it's about a woman, and I mean, it's about a young woman who's a newspaper writer and her fiance or boyfriend, and then about the epidemic and what happens to them. And it's one of those things. It's a beautiful novella, but it also ties back to right now in a way that's kind of unexpected. So I went back and reread that for the first time.
For sure.
God, 20 years.
How do you see, as I'm pouring the next wine, which is a great wine, I'm reading a lot about the history of the West of America and California, and from the 1840s, 50s, 60s. This is another great wine from Buena Vista. We wanted to keep you focused onto history because right. You love history. How do you see society evolving at large? Because you're an intellectual besides food and wine. So what's your view of the evolution we're going to experience in the next, quarter of a century or century to come?
Honestly, right now, I'm quite worried. It seems that, to me, that the sort of polarization of society is only becoming more profound. I think that, unfortunately, some of the tech aspects of society, but social media particularly, is driving that kind of intolerance on all sides. And I'm worried about the decline of democratic institutions towards autocratic governments, not necessarily throughout, not just the U.S., but through Europe right now. The rise of far-right organizations in Europe. I mean, it's a worrisome time. There have certainly been other worrisome times.
For sure.
But I also think that, and this is a very, I'm not an expert in social analysis of large cultural things, but I have been wondering whether some of this, there's an aspect of what's going on with technology and how it's linking us together that is somewhat dissolving national barriers or national boundaries. And we're used to living in a world that where nations are the defining political entities. Nations have not always been the case. It's really fairly recent development in the history of humans is that we have nations.
Very true.
You've had tribes, you've had kingdoms, but the kind of the way the world is structured right now. So you do start to wonder whether if what technology is doing is a slow dissolve of national barriers, whether it's that some of this nationalism is a response to that and a kind of a reactionary response against it. But is it a reactionary response against something that's absolutely inevitable?
So as you so well noted, so what is your advice to your daughter? What discussions are you having? And recommendation, maybe suggestions to her?
Study well at school.
Yes. That's a good start.
Stop goofing off. No, I mean, my recommendation to her is, I actually do recommend that she read and study as hard as possible.
Yes.
Knowledge is power. I think, I do recommend to her to be flexible, that, that the thing you think you love when you're 17 may not be what your career is.
Yes.
And,
Point.
and be open to things. I think that's, life is, a lot of the surprises of life are pretty great. So, don't be fearful.
That's a great advice. Well, you're a very open-minded person yourself.
Yeah, I try to.
You started to where you are today. I mean, your path. Do you believe in destiny, Ray?
I don't believe in destiny exactly, because the one problem I have with destiny is that if you believe in destiny completely, then you get rid of free choice or free will.
Yeah.
But I do think that chance plays a giant role in things, and chance can be a form of destiny. I mean, if I hadn't happened to meet the girlfriend I met at the time I did, and if I hadn't gotten the writing fellowship that took me to California, if I got a writing fellowship instead that went to Michigan, then I wouldn't be in the wine.
Fate and destiny could be defined differently, right?
Yes, exactly. I like to think that the good things that have happened are destiny, and the bad things that happen are chance.
Well, I asked this question because I really feel, knowing your background and having been fortunate to know you for many years and admiring you, I feel, you were meant to do what you're doing today. You have the charisma, you have the energy, you have the talent, you have the skills of writing, you have the open-mindedness, you love food, you love wine, you love people.
Yeah.
And I feel there's no accident that you are who you are at this level of your life for no reason that it was somehow written.
I think I really do believe I got very fortunate in that I have been allowed to do the thing that I would do best. I mean, whatever happened that got me to the job I have, I'm very grateful for, because I do think that I'm, much more than if I'd gone to law school and become a lawyer.
Well, let's say you're talking to my daughters now, who are half of the age of yours, and you got lucky to be allowed to do what you like.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, define that further. How do you drive that? Because this is very well said, but don't you think you had a great deal of influence within this path?
Mm-hmm. I do think you do. It's funny. I actually got some advice. Robin Lael, probably.
Of course.
I got some advice from Robin Lael when I was doing that first article about Stanford graduates. And I was talking to her about getting into the wine business. And she said, don't look for a job, create the job you want and find a way to do it. And it was the right advice at the right time. And it's like, when I brought up lawyers, I don't mean to dismiss lawyers, because I have like a very good friend who is a brilliant lawyer.
Yes.
But he's doing what he was meant to do. I would not be a brilliant lawyer. I don't like arguing that much. And so.
Well,
Robin
wants to argue when you can agree.
That's right. Wine's all about agreement. It's wine. I just wrote, in something for work, actually, that one of the magical properties of wine is its ability to bring people together. It really does dissolve boundaries. I mean, if you drink too much, it dissolves them completely and you fall over. But it's dissolved gravity. but
yes.
It does. It's a social binding thing, and it's really kind of wonderful that it does that. And in a way that I don't think distilled spirits do.
No.
So it's a slower. You drink wine over.
But I feel as well, when you taste wine, you taste culture. You're interested in the sense of place, in the culture that surrounds it, the civilization that goes way back. I mean, I've observed you so many times, not only giving seminars, but obviously publicly speaking and writing. You're really interested in what is behind, right?
Yes, always. I mean, I mean, that's the most interesting thing about wine to me. I mean, it's nice to say it tastes like blackberries or it tastes delicious, but what the story behind it is always the motivating thing.
I've always thought one of the biggest signs of intelligence is curiosity. How did you develop yours? Because you're so audaciously curious.
I think I got lucky in terms of my parents, who were, my father was a professor. My mother was also, studied English and studied literature. And so they were very curious people, and you pass that down, I think.
Yes.
I also have always loved to read, and I read voraciously, and you can't love to read without being curious, because part of why you read, and reading rewards that curiosity, because you learn so much about, if it's fiction in a novel, you learn about what could be, and if it's nonfiction, you learn about what is. But either way, you're taken out of what you already know.
Well said.
So
now, maybe we're discovering your passion throughout those words. What is Réal's passion?
My passion, my ongoing longest term passion has been for writing.
Yes.
It happens that wine was what I was meant to write about, but I knew from early on that I wanted to write. That was what I wanted to do. And I think that comes out of reading. You read and you think, well, I'd like to make something like that. But I love music too. I can't play anything, and I'm not technically, I can't listen to something and tell you that it's a G minor 7 diminished whatever. But I find music is and I kind of don't want to know too much, because I can enjoy music purely as a amateur. And throughout my life, music has been what has been one of the sustaining passions that I have, whether it's visiting, going to concerts live, or whether it's listening, at home alone.
I remember the great party you organized in Aspen, and you said, Jean-Charles, you should come, and we were dancing together at the pool.
And dancing is fun.
Early in the morning, so you have the rhythm in your blood. I've seen that.
Yeah, well, my mother taught ice dancing, actually. So it's maybe there's some internal rhythm that's been there all along. But yes, Aspen does tend to involve a lot of dancing at 3 a.m. We won't be having that in the virtual part, but should you want to dance at 3 a.m. after attending the virtual thing, please do.
Hey, Ray, a quick question. I've struggled in my life with reading novels, because I have to read something and learn something from it. So the philosophers I love, history I love, and sociology I love, anthropology I love. What do you recommend to dive into a novel and escape? Because I have a hard time doing this.
What specific novel do I recommend?
In general. How do you get into a story and just succeed into reading a novel versus a reading that is educational?
I think, what I like about, what novels, there's two things going on in most novels. There's the story, which is narrative, which like a movie pulls you along, but the novels have a way of getting into the interior of humans, the why we feel the way we do and why we think the way we do. The human heart in conflict with itself. And that, I think that's what makes them particularly compelling to me, is that it I can't remember which writer said it, but the basic quote was, great novels don't answer questions, they ask them. And so they make you, ideally you put down a book, a great novel, and one, you're satisfied with the story, but two, it's made you think. It's made you act, think about people and how they interact together, or was the way they acted the way they should have acted, or, and it's, it requires a sort of imaginative empathy, I guess.
Oh, I love how you say it. It's the way it makes you think. I love it. Well, talking about making us think, isn't this wine?
This wine is
Sheriff.
Yeah.
The perfect one with your pizza.
Yeah, this would be an excellent pizza wine, I have to say. It would also be a very good steak wine.
I hope I'm making you jealous. I'm serving it from our Baccarat JCB Passion Collection own design.
I'm serving it from the bottle.
Even better too, because you have an amazing sheriff badge.
The badge is quite something. So which makes me ask, because it's what I do, is why the sheriff?
Well, in 1850, the Count of Buena Vista was one of the first sheriffs ever in California, and in specifically Southern California.
Really?
Next to the first mission, the Catholic mission, you know, there was 21, 22 missions from San Diego to Sonoma. It's very funny because he started at the first mission. The prison he built as a sheriff was next to the actual first settling. And then he moved to Sonoma in the last mission and he built Buena Vista. So in honor of his incredible life, he was very orientated towards the community as well, like you are, and doing a lot of things for others as you do. We thought this one would be appropriate, and we wanted to obviously honor the Count in his life because, you know, you are great at what you do today because of where you come from and what you've done before. And he was a great sheriff. So we thought, let's create a blend of the key great varieties of California that he brought. So you have Grenache, you have Zinfandel, Cabernet Sauvignon, Petite Syrah, Merlot, Mission, the first grapes that the Catholic...
It's got Mission in it. Okay.
So this is the wine.
So that's fascinating. I mean, they're so... Mission is a fascinating grape because it was the first grape that came to California. And I've just been writing about Chile. There's País, you know, as it's called in Chile.
That's right.
There's never had phylloxera. There's 200-year-old País vines producing wine in Chile, but you rarely see it in a blend in California, almost ever, which is strange. It's a a small percentage, but I'm happy to hear there's Grenache in it. I thought it's got that kind of generosity of fruit that Grenache gives, and yes. I love that variety, and there's more and more going on with it in California, which I'm kind of fascinated by.
Yeah.
It's such when done well, it's such a delicious wine, but it's also terroir transmitting because it's so different on sand than it is on granite, let's say. It's
absolutely.
What is this? Is this an expensive wine?
It's around $40 to $50, so it's very reasonable.
Mm-hmm. That's delicious.
Quite amazing. What a cocktail of grapes.
Yeah, it's quite a cocktail of grapes. And is it from one particular part of Sonoma, or is it?
Well, yeah, we focused in Sonoma, very close, in fact, to the winery.
Okay.
And, you know, we have amazing hillsides. So when you talk about Zinfandel and Cabernet, you have that beautiful Monte Rosso vineyards. Mm-hmm. And we're surrounded with incredible places. So this is a little bit of rock pile, a little bit of everything there. So the whole idea was to harness it as the history of the Count around Sonoma and create really an amazing red blend, something that is spicy and unique and deep and thoughtful and in some ways powerful.
Yeah, and delicious. It makes me want to go out and grill something.
Well, it's still time. So
it's still tricky in New York City in a second floor apartment.
Well, just open the windows, you know.
Right.
Ray, you could walk around New York City. You take off the badge,
right?
Sheriff badge, because in honor of all the sheriffs, you know, many sheriffs are members of Buena Vista because of it, and they love the wine. You put it on your hat and you say you're part of the Buena Vista Sheriff Association. You won't get a ticket for smoke.
That's good. Well, as long as if I can get out of getting tickets for parking, that's the key thing.
That's the key.
That's the killer in New York.
Well, I always have a bottle of this in my trunk. So whenever I get pulled over, this is the remedy against the ticket.
That's very clever.
Well, Ray, a few more questions, but one I've always wanted to ask you, and what is your dream or a dream you're willing to share that you've never yet or you haven't yet fulfilled?
There's a number, actually. I mean, I do want to publish a book, and I haven't gotten around to it yet.
A novel, right?
A novel or a book on wine. Don't know when I'm going to have the time to do it, but I want to do that. I've never been to India. I've always wanted to go to India and check it out. It's a fascinating place to me. I've been a lot of places in the world. I've never set foot there. I have some very good friends who are Indian writers. So I would be able to travel with someone, which I think it's always good to travel with someone who knows a place locally.
And let us know, you know, we have a joint venture in India with Kapil Sekri. For telling, we make a wine exceptional named J Noon.
Okay.
one of the most recognized wine in India in terms of quality. And we'll gladly welcome you there. So let us know when you're coming to India.
Okay. And the third thing that it's still a dream that I've never gotten around to doing is making wine.
Ah,
I mean, I've worked as a cellar rat, but I've never made my own wine. And I think anyone who writes about wine has to be curious about whether they can actually pull it off and make something that I would actually recommend to someone, you know.
well, we could start at Raymond Vineyards. We do the winemaker for a day.
Oh, that's true. There you
So
go.
we could make a small, a few cases for you.
Right.
You could distribute it and see the response, and then you can
See if I can actually sell my own wine. There you go.
it's a great outcome. Why not? This is the only thing you haven't done in the world of wine.
Food and Wine recommends it highly. It's
So, final question, Ray, and you won't escape that one.
Mhm.
What is there a secret? Because I've seen you late at night, early in the morning, in many circumstances. So I know a fair amount about you. Is there a secret you've never shared you're willing to share?
secret that I've never shared that I'm willing to share. Well, I said there are plenty that I'm not willing to share. Let me think of what I'm willing to share. Yeah, let's see what can qualify as a secret, though. I'm trying to think. I mean, I did pretend to be someone else once and went to a business conference in college just to see what it was like to be someone else.
How did you feel?
It was interesting. People kept addressing me by a different name. A friend of mine had been invited to this conference and he couldn't go, so I just pretended to be him. And it was before 9/11 and everything, so you could actually get on a plane and not worry about them checking ID that carefully.
I do the same as you. I pretend I'm Jean-Charles Boisset and this is my twin.
Yeah.
So we can always play with it.
Yeah, I don't know if that qualifies as a secret, but I certainly didn't tell many people about it.
So now, Ray, you're full of wisdom. You obviously have an amazing, incredible career. You're a great inspiration to so many. Is there a message you want to send to the world as your closing statement today that your daughter, your wife, all your friends, and all of us we'd love to hear?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a very profound message, but I do think that, you're always trying to have a glass of wine with someone you don't know that well, so that because you'll get to know them better afterwards. You'll probably like them more.
I love it. That's a great advice.
Yeah.
Wine is the catalyst of discussion, conversation, and hopefully secures friendship, right?
Yeah. And if everybody did that, then I think the world would be, we get along somewhat better.
I love it. Well, Ray, under those wise advice, under this wonderful conversation together, I want to thank you for being part of the JCB Live. And
Absolutely.
I cannot wait for everybody to go onto the Ray Isle Instagrams, as well as the Food and Wine, and obviously start to spend even more time with Ray, because it was only a short hour, but he's fascinating. Ray, I want to raise my glass to friendship and your talent.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jean-Charles. It's so nice to be here, or be here, so to speak.
That's right. Love it.